What's this then? A first-person shooter released exclusively on the Gameboy Advance? Based on what? And there's a sequel to the game? What film is this? I think we had better take a closer look, hadn't we? 2002 was an interesting time for the action movie genre. Martial arts stars like Jet Li, Jackie Chan, Tony Jaa and Donnie Yen were approaching the peak of their popularity in the West, and more pertinently, The Matrix had come out a couple of years before, and that movie, you might have heard of it, was pretty successful. If you wanted to do an action movie after The Matrix, then you'd better put in loads of cool shooting sequences, all manner of high kicks and martial arts chicanery, and then you had to make sure that your action stars were dressed in bum-hugging black clothing while they did all of this. Ecks and Sever was very much an action movie of that time, and it had all the right ingredients. You had Antonio Banderas as FBI agent Jeremiah Ecks, for example. Banderas was a stable B-level tier action star at the time, who had racked up a ton of hits in movies such as Desperado, Assassins, Interview with the Vampire and the Zorro movies. He wasn't as bankable a star as, say, a Bruce Willis or a Tom Cruise, but he wasn't far away. Sever was played by Lucy Liu, who had been one of the breakout stars of the highly successful Ally McBeal series, and had already had a martial arts style blockbuster in Charlie's Angels under her belt. And of course, she was about to work with Tarantino as Orinishi, half Chinese, half Japanesey, in Kill Bill Volume 1. Backing them up were people like Ray Park, who of course played Darth Maul in the Star Wars The Phantom Menace movie, and the Toad in X-Men, and Talisa Soto, who had played Kitana in Mortal Kombat, and Lupe Lamora in Bond movie License to Kill. All of these are fairly good ingredients for a moderately successful action movie with martial arts elements in them then. Well, they may be, but I guess the chef was sick that day and actually vomited into the bowl, because a 0% score on review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, the worst reviewed film in the site's history nonetheless, and an absolutely dismal $19 million gross back internationally from a $70 million production budget would suggest that Ecks and Sever didn't really work out. The plotline has Agent Ecks brought back by the FBI to use his manhunting skills to hunt down the unstoppable spy Sever, who has kidnapped the young son of a shadowy figure at the head of a number of international agencies. After a few battles and numerous pursuits, revelations occur, and Ecks does less versus and more working with Sever, and so the movie continues until the final credits happen. It's a movie that exists, but perhaps shouldn't. As a basic premise, maybe the movie should have worked a bit better than it did, but it still has a chance as a game to work, right? I think it does. However, with what we know about other movie licenses of the time and before, if the movie looks like it's going to suck, then the games company just sort of gives up and curls out any old turd onto the game shelf and then walks away pretending that it had nothing to do with them. So what was different here? And how are there two games based on Ecks vs Sever? The answer to that is, well, publishers BAM Entertainment had a close relationship with Franchise Pictures, a so-so production company who had moderate success for a time and allowed their movies to be developed way ahead of production. At one point of development, the team were under the belief, for instance, that Sever was a male assassin as opposed to the character that would end up being played by Lucy Liu. Crawfish would receive script updates on occasion during the production of the first movie, but they were allowed a certain amount of free rein as well, allowing them to work with the game based around the core elements such as narrative, characters and environments. The first game, released in autumn 2001, actually came out a full 1 year ahead of the movie. As such, the first game doesn't follow the plot line of the movie that closely because the film was nowhere near ready. Whereas the sequel, which was released around the same time as the movie was released, it follows the plotline of the movie a lot closer. Compare the art style of the cover of the first game with that of the second, and you can see how much closer the art style is to that of the promotional materials, such as the movie poster for the movie itself. So with that little look at the history of the Ecks and Sever license behind us, how does the game actually compare to other games of its type? Well, if you compare the visuals of Ecks vs Sever or Ballistic Ecks vs Sever to any of the first-person shooters of the time, they're going to immediately suffer. The characters you fight and assist are blocky to the point of looking like Minecraft rejects. The hands of Ecks and Sever seem to be represented in washed out colours, and the background details are the ugliest in any first-person shoot 'em up that I've ever played. Mind you, I don't play a lot because I get car sick playing them because I'm weak. Just look at the toilet in Ecks vs Sever 2 here. If you want to have a dump in that, you'll just be essentially laying your log there on a granite cube. And I thought these 3 seashells in Demolition Man were mystifying. This is new levels of complicated toilet technology. To understand what's really going on though, and to really get an idea of how impressive that this software actually is, you have to remember that the hardware it's running on is essentially a portable Super Nintendo, and you only have to look at the first person games on the original Super Nintendo system. Look at the first person sections of Jurassic Park, for instance, as they're blocky as much as Ecks vs Sever and its sequel, but they're running like a sloth on heroin in a bath of treacle, and they're viewed through this very tiny little window, which I think are supposed to represent Alan Grant's goggles that he never wore. Ecks vs Sever and its sequel are way smoother in comparison, and they also have different planes. They've also got a multiplayer mode which supports multiple players, which must have been very tricky to run on the Gameboy Advance hardware, and therefore set it apart from its contemporaries on the same system. It is a real feat, and I can't possibly undercook how good these titles are for what they're running on. Especially impressive as Crawfish put them out in just 10 months of production time a piece. They really are quite the technical feat for the little old Game Boy Advance, and a testament to how accomplished Croydon developers Crawfish Interactive were at manipulating the hardware. They actually created a first-person engine for this game. Now, to know a little bit more about Crawfish, they only lasted for 5 years, but they specialised in Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance software, and indeed pumped out a ton of titles in that time, many of them based on movies and TV series. Some of them were based on flop movies such as Driven here, which is a new fresh vein for me to look at and make another video on, should I so choose. Hurrah! So yeah, I'm well impressed with the technical feats that Crawfish managed to pull off here. Mind you, I always gasp at street magic, and I always clap like a seal when seeing animals act like people, so don't worry too much about my opinion. I'm very easily impressed. What's less impressive perhaps though is the gameplay, and this applies to both games because they're very similar in feel down to the quick turnaround time. It's okay. Missions are small and punchy, the environments are contained within repetitive rooms, which are often beguiling to manoeuvre around. The controls are fine, with a very generous auto-aim, assisting you and holding your hand and spitting on a tissue to get a mark off your cheek before you go through the gate of school. What I'm trying to say here is it's very easy to hit your opponents, even if you're only sort of vaguely looking at them. One thing I didn't enjoy though was the very first level of the second game. You're supposed to find a secret entrance to this hideous looking house. It's something to do with this block, which I presume is one of those cellar entrance doors. I've got no idea though on how to access it. I did try for about half an hour, but I gave up and used a password to go to the next level instead. That is not a good way to start a video game. Another problem is with the out-and-out dumb thickery of the AI in the escort missions. Stop running into the wall, Cloney McClonason and your 4 friends. Just follow me down these stairs. Honestly, it's terrible. Overall though, I found it really hard to criticise either game. They are both okay, and they are incredible technical feats for the hardware. I wasn't expecting much from 2 games based on a flop movie like Ecks and Sever, and I got much more than I was expecting, and for that reason I should be impressed, and I sort of am. There was a PlayStation 2 game planned, but then the film happened, so obviously it didn't. Okay, thanks, and bye.